spend some time looking at this passage from Matthew chapter 15 and verses 21 to 28. A passage that you would find some parity with elsewhere in the Gospels. But as ever, and this is the beauty of why we have different Gospels, well, I would say anyway, is that we get some different emphasis that occurs, some different things that feature. But we deal with what we have here in front of us now, which is Matthew's version of events, this encounter between Jesus and the Canaanite woman. We find it in Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 to 28. If you want to look in the Bibles that we have, it's on page 18 in the New Testament. And first of all, the woman is a Canaanite woman. She's from the local area there. She is one of the indigenous peoples, one of the people that would have been the enemies of the people of Israel when they came back and reoccupied their promised land. Her descendants today would pretty much be Palestinian people today. And she was the kind of person that Jewish people, and in particular Jewish rabbi, would not and should not have done business with. I say done business with, I mean that metaphorically, well, and literally too, yeah, but shouldn't have had that kind of contact with. She was not the kind of person that should have mixed with. But here she is, when Jesus is in this territory that is outside of the main Jewish territory, but there were large Jewish communities within that area as well, in Tyre and Sidon. And she shouts out. She keeps shouting out to him all the time. From verse 22, just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." So she keeps shouting out and shouting out, so much so that the disciples, Jesus' followers, want to kind of get rid of her. A bit like maybe the minders for a politician might be that they want to kind of just silence that person, just to get them out of the way. This is too embarrassing. This is not the kind of person that you want. Yeah, if it was today, to kind of bundle Jesus into a car and speed off. Unless it was Macron, the French president, he was one for getting in there. If he would have been actually straight in there. And Jesus' response, it would seem, is not maybe what we would expect to be the automatic response of Jesus of Nazareth, the Prince of Peace, the Son of God, he who we see as being so welcoming and inclusive. It doesn't quite seem to fit the mold here. This is puzzling. This is maybe troubling. There might be all sorts of reasons why he doesn't. If it was me, it might be because I didn't hear. A month ago, I bit the bullet and it's only £1, bought some Poundland glasses, okay? Because I was forever, if the batteries aren't working, the microphones aren't working very well today. And quite often, this is not my fault today, but other times it would be because I put the batteries in the wrong way around because I couldn't read which was plus and minus. And because I'm so rubbish, I didn't know which end it was naturally. You should be able to work it out, shouldn't you? So I bit the bullet and bought some glasses. But really what I think I need to do is go to Specsavers and have my ears tested. Because there are so many things. We go, when we go on holiday and there are crickets making a lovely noise in the night time and other people are saying, "Oh, can you hear the crickets?" And I'm, no. So for me, it may well be that I literally could not have heard. And maybe that might have been the case for Jesus. He might have had a lot of dust in his ear because it's a very dusty climate. Or it might be that he was sometimes it's known as throwing a deafen. Has anybody heard that expression before? To throw a deafen? Yeah? So, to throw a deaf one, I think, if you understand it better in that way. Okay, so just to kind of pretend you haven't heard. Yeah, a bit like you can pretend you haven't seen somebody. I saw another minister yesterday. I'm not hurt about this, but I saw another Baptist minister yesterday in a shop somewhere. I won't say where it was because that might give away which minister it might be, okay? And I was waving like that. They completely ignored me. Feeling really insecure about it. I'll have them at the next meeting. Anyway, but we can all do that sometimes. We pretend we haven't seen or heard somebody. Oh, we're not going to keep going. So I guess when there's a woman going, Jesus, go over here, Jesus. And you're thinking, oh, no. So it might be that Jesus just, because he needed to prioritize, that he needed to actually pretend that he hadn't heard, that he threw a deafen. But it might have been more that it was about priorities and it was not his time. It was not the priority at that moment to be dealing with this woman and with the people that were not Jewish. Jesus came, first of all, he says elsewhere, for the lost children of Israel. But he says that here too. It might be that she just didn't quite fit with that priority. And a bit like, has anybody listened or watched Count Arthur Strong on the telly? Anybody? Is it just me and Mel then? Okay. So I'll talk to Mel at this moment about this. But there's one episode there where this character called Count Arthur Strong, he has a bit of an obsession with Terry Wogan. Okay. This is from when Terry Wogan, I think, was still alive. And anyway, he tries to get to see him. He thinks he has some kind of connection with him. And he's there outside Broadcasting House, just shouting Terry Wogan, going, Wogan, 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 Wogan. And he goes on and on and on for about 30 seconds, really embarrassing, beyond that point. And I guess for Terry Wogan, probably in this episode, this is not real. I don't think Terry Wogan really did this, but would have just ignored him because he was off to do whatever he was going to do in Broadcasting House, a very important thing like children in need or something. And he ignored him. Even though he was shouting out because it was not his priority at that moment. So maybe we can understand that Jesus was not being quite so hard, quite so mean towards this woman who it seems like he ignores. Maybe Jesus was just being true to his mission, and his mission was the mission that he'd been given by God the Father, was to come and seek first the lost children of Israel, to come to the Jewish nation first, God's chosen people. That was his priority. That was why he was born Jewish. That's why he was in that place. That's what he was trying to overturn and correct, was to get them to see the way that they needed to rebuild and mend their relationship with God. It was not yet his time to roll out his mission for the Gentiles, for the non-Jewish people. But what we see is that something different happens. Jesus makes this reference, or has this bit of a banter, an exchange with this woman. And it seems that he changes his mind. Unless he was sure that that's what was going to happen in the first place, because he knows everything and knows that that's how it would turn out. But I believe that this was a real encounter where he really changed his mind. He was really persuaded that this is what he needed to do. And so this raises this scary question for some of us. Is it possible that God can change his mind? Is it possible that God can be persuaded to do something different if we see that Jesus is the Son of God, and so this human representation that we have of what God is like and how God behaves and what God's priorities are? But that's a bit scary for us, isn't it? Because we like to sing, faithful one, so unchanging, and think of God as just being like this rock that won't move, won't change in any way. And yet, how can it be that here he's changing his mind, or Jesus is changing his mind, if we understand him to be the Son of God, which, as Comey reminded us last week, I hope that we do. But isn't that the point of lots of our prayers? Hear my cry, O Lord. When we're crying out for God to do something, that might be about him changing his mind, but that we're trying to bend what God's will is. We're trying to actually get him to respond in a certain way, just as this woman does here. Now, I firmly believe that God's nature does not change. Towards the end of the Bible, the disciple John boils it down, doesn't he? To God is... God is, this is a Terry Wogan game, okay, blankety blank, okay? So Wogan says, God is love, yeah? God is love, it says in 1 John, yeah? God is love, that's what it boils down to. His nature does not shift. His priorities remain the same. His will remains the same. His purposes remain the same. But maybe the change is only about timing. Maybe the change is only about those kind of things at a micro level. You know, I just decided to step like that, and then I'm going to go that way. I don't know whether God is directing my every single step like some kind of a marionette, some kind of a puppet, that God is directing me in that way. There is some kind of interaction between that's me, because I've got the strings there, you see. There is some kind of interaction between us and what we do here at a micro level and what God is doing overall, what his overarching purposes are for us. And maybe we see Jesus, the Son of God, seemingly changing his mind, perhaps doing this to make a point, to let us know that God is responsive, that God does listen, that God does truly hear our prayers, to let us know that he can be swayed, and to remind us about his compassion that should be our compassion. You know, I see this, what happens here, as being a bit of a, oh, go on, kind of a moment, where Jesus is convinced by the arguments of this woman and just, yeah, all right then. So let's just read what it says. After verse 23, where it says Jesus didn't answer her at all, and then his disciples are urging him to send them away, or send her away. And then verse 24, he says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. He answered, it is not fair to take the children's food, by which he means the people of Israel, the house of Israel, and throw it to the dogs. When he says dogs, this was a rather unkind term that Jewish people would have used about anybody that wasn't Jewish. That's just how people would have referred, and she would have understood that, but it was just kind of an image that he was using. She said, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. She's kind of understanding that his priority must be about who he's come to reach out to initially. But, oh, come on, Jesus, there's got to be some love left for me as well. And then Jesus answered her, woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed instantly. Her daughter was healed instantly because of her faith, because of her persistence, because of that, oh, go on then, moment that we see in Jesus. And so we, I believe, are challenged to be inspired, if we are inspired by what we see and hear and read about Jesus, to be that kind of a person. Not the kind of person that dismisses people first of all, but to understand that we might have rules and frameworks that we set up, but those rules are there to be broken sometimes. Those rules are there to be bent. So, you know, we have rules about how food bank works. Don't tell anybody out there, but we have rules about how food bank is supposed to work and over how people might access it and so on. But there are times when simply as compassionate people we have to say, oh, go on then. Just this time. That's fine. You can have food even though we've not gone through the whole process, because I can see that your need is great in this instance. Like there's times when we might say, I never give to people that come to the door for money, or I never give to people that beg. But there are times, I hope, even if we have that kind of viewpoint, because, I'm not giving it to them because I've just spent it on booze and drugs and things. But I hope that we have other times when we have had an, oh, go on then, kind of a moment. I hope there are times when even if we've made the most stringent and strict of rules, that we have had where that Christian compassion has overcome it, just as we see here in Jesus. And what we see, I think, with Jesus is him maybe making some new policy on the hoof, like a politician might. It fits with what the overall aim of God was for us. And we see glimpses of that in the Old Testament. We see it coming through in what the prophet Isaiah says. We see it coming through in the kind of people that God uses who are not from the Jewish nation. We see it then in the way that what Jesus himself says in Matthew chapter 28 about the disciples need to go into all nations and make disciples. And we see it then it is rolled out in what actually occurs to the disciples of the Acts of the Apostles as they take the gospel to the whole of the world. And here we are today. It fits with that, but it didn't fit at that particular moment. And it is a call for us to be compassionate. It is a call for us to look at the circumstances that we find ourselves in and for us to be responsive, to change the rules if we need to be open, to listen, to the shouty people of this world, the people that are an embarrassment, the people that are crying out, the people that mess up our streets, mess up the shiny image that we might want to have, the people that don't quite fit. But what we see, it's not just about anybody. We see in this person here that her faith is real. She is persistent. She recognizes who Jesus is, and she shows faith that he recognizes. And finally, finally, let this be an encouragement to us. If we feel like we are like this woman, shouting out for mercy, shouting out, falling on our knees for Jesus to help us, because we feel that we don't quite fit the bill, because we might be the kind of person that other people want to silence, because we feel that shame and that hurt and that anger and that sadness that we feel that we can't share at the table. Perhaps because we've lived an unsettled or are living an unsettled lifestyle, or we're a single parent, or our relationships have gone all wrong, or our relationships aren't the kind that the church we perceive generally approves of, or because we're homeless, or we're too poor, or we're too rich, or we're workless, we're worthless, we feel abused, disheartened, discriminated against. We feel that we're voiceless, and now that we found our voice, we're not sure that we like our voice, nor that anybody else does. If you can identify with any of those, and in any way can identify with this woman, then be encouraged that your voice can be heard, that there is a response. And there is a response that is a response of love. That we should have the kind of faith that this woman had. To have the kind of faith that's able to face up to the fact that it's uncertain about what God's response might be. It might not fit with the neat response that we wanted, or that we're sure that God should be sorting out. But to have the faith to be persistent, and to have the faith even to dialogue with God. He will listen, and we must listen to each other as we cry out. Amen.